G'day all. Thought I'd get into another episode of my story. This one is originally titled "Enacting the Exit," but I think what I'm going to do is I'm going to break this into a kind of part A, part B, where I'm going to first focus on planning the exit before talking about enacting the exit. Now, I know everybody's situation is unique. Everybody has different dynamics for which they operate and different challenges and different issues. So, where I talk, so my caveat on this episode is where I talk about planning the exit and enacting the exit. So, these two um, recognize that this is my story. And if there are lessons or nuggets in there, by all means take it, but don't take it as the plan or the thing to do. Um, because my situation is as unique to me as your situation is to you. So the other thing is I've had to take a job. so I'm going to try to record as much of this as I can before I've got to go to work. But I've had to pick up a job to moonlight somewhere else to pay the bills, which is as simple as that. So this episode might sound a little bit funky because halfway through, I suspect I'm going to have to hit pause and then come back in another half day or so to pick it up. So planning the exit. So the last episode we landed on some of the kind of flags I was throwing up about your abuser starts to recognize there's something different. And that's very, very true once your awakening moment has hit and you start to go about planning the exit. So, um, at a really broad perspective, planning is as it means, which is how do you get ready to exit safely? And acting is obviously safely exiting. None of those go to plan. So you'll still do your plan, you'll still enact, but just assume a lot of stuff will go to shit. Again, mind my language. When you're in that mode of planning for an exit, your behavior shifts and changes, and your abuser notices that instantly. So I might do a video on this another day, but you are your abuser's supply. So, what does it mean to be your abuser's supply? Is the video I might do another day. But because you are their primary source of supply, as soon as they can see a disruption to supply, they start to go, well, no, I've got to get my supply going again. Why isn't my supply working the way it should be working? What's going on here? And they will do everything they can within their kitty to try to get you behaving the way that they are trying to program you to behave. And when you're gotten to a point where you're planning an exit, so you've had your awakening moment, you've realized what the fuck is going on, you realize you need to get out, you are not going to behave the way that they want you to behave. So they will, for those of you who haven't watched the TTI model or watched the video around TTI, I'll put a card up on screen now for it. But they will shift their tactics. They'll scattergun, they'll escalate, they'll pull out old cards, new cards, so on and so forth. So in reality, when you're in the middle of it, it's fucking scary. Like it's really, 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 really scary because they escalate significantly. It's like you imagine you're hammering a nail and the nail's not behaving the way you want it to. So you go, fuck this, and you hit it harder and harder and harder and harder and harder. It's like, fucking hell. And you get angry at the nail for not behaving the way it should be. And you get the hammer and you go, screw this, I'm going to get a great big friggin' mallet and I'm going to smash the crap out of this to get the nail behaving the way you want. Obviously, in this analogy, you are the nail. So then, so that's what you need to prepare for, and I'll talk a little bit in later on about some of the things you need to have fortified when you start planning the exit. But be aware that that's what's going to happen. The abuse will escalate. But there are elements to it that are worth pulling apart to be able to understand more clearly so that you're prepped up and ready for it. So then why that happens. So um in my story, I had three things that happened at this point that really muddled up my ability to plan properly. So thing one was I was petrified. I was fucking scared at this point. Like I was really, really genuinely scared. I was scared because I am a man who is looking to divorce his wife. And any man who in today's society knows the court system will destroy you, absolutely rip you to shreds. And I had I had been working my ass off for decades in my career to get to where I was and achieve everything I had achieved. And I knew that if I went into the court system, it would destroy it. And it did. I've never worked in industry like that ever again. And and I'm sorry, I don't mean to share that to scare you or dissuade you. I'm sharing that because this is my story. So then I was petrified of what was going to happen to me if I went through the court and legal system. I was petrified if I spoke to the police or reported the abuse to anyone. I had reached out in the previous episode. I'd reached out usually for help in all the domestic violence centers, and I got nothing. I was really scared about reaching out to those because I knew how I might be perceived or treated, whether it would get flipped on me. And I'll tell you later on a story of where it did from the court system. The whole lot got flipped. So then I was petrified of that occurring. And it's a genuine fear. It's a genuine concern. Like this isn't just, me making stuff up, quivering in my boots. These are genuine concerns, genuine issues. So then I beyond that was still super confused. Like, despite again, like in the epiphany that you have in an awakening moment doesn't exist. I was still confused. I'm like, am I the abuser? And I would have this cycle where I'd go, no, 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 I'm being abused. No, 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 I'm the one who's causing her to abuse. No, 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 I am the abuser. And I'd go through this cycle constantly, wondering whether or not I manipulated her into her behavior. So therefore, it is me who is the abuser. And then I'll be going, but hang on a second, there have been times when I was angry. So maybe I was the abuser. And I do remember yelling and screaming. So maybe I'm the abusive one and she's not. She's just, reacting to me. And then it would sit there and go, no, 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 hang on. And then I have to go back over all of the evidence. So then that was occurring. So that was thing two. So there's kind of vacillation between um, feeling like you were the one who was actually fully at fault versus feeling like you needed to escape out of this scenario, which is very, very common. And then the third thing that was happening was I was already emotionally dysregulated. And for those of you who have read my book, you'll understand a little bit of where that's kind of come from. So protective interrupts and abusive hijacks. And again, if you haven't read the book, I encourage you to. I was already emotionally dysregulated. I was already all over the shop. Like there was no direct link between external input and internal emotion, and I was kind of flopping around like crazy. And I had started to deploy things like grey rock, where make yourself uninteresting. So you would kind of on the facade, out exterior facade, kind of grow as boring as you can, which by the way escalates the abuse because they're like shit, shit, shit. I'm losing control, so they'll escalate. At least in my situation until they eventually realize it's not working and they change tactic. So that I'm not saying don't do grey rock. Grey rock 100% do because they go, oh, that doesn't work anymore. So they stop that tactic. and then they move to another tactic. So the escalations are like a scattergun approach. It's like, shit, tactic A didn't work. Move to tactic B. Okay, tactic B is not working. Move to C. Oh, tactic C is not working. Now I'm going to attack the fact that he's grey rocked. So I was super trying to be super calm, but I was becoming from emotionally dysregulated. I went the complete opposite, and I went to emotionally detached. So I had this mode of when got into planning the exit, where in the abuse I was emotionally all over the shop. Like she pulled a string and I was dancing. Yeah, like that's the relationship. She pulled a string, I danced to her tune. And then once I started getting into planning the exit, those strings no longer worked. And again, if you looked at the TTI, I started recognizing the tactics, started recognizing the triggers in me, and I started cutting those strings. And I became super calm, super detached emotionally. And there was some real good, solid value in that, like really good value. The value was that when she would try to get me to commit to things, I could approach it in a non-emotional way and approach it in a logical way. Which when you get into planning the exit, enacting the exit, when you get to divorce, separation, divorce, very, 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 very important to not react out of emotion that she is driving, but instead react out of rational, logical thought. So that was great. But also, it made her lose it, being super calm and super emotionally detached. But also, she would uh, she she would uh, yell at me for being emotionally detached. So the story in her abuse went from, you are always so sensitive, you're always so emotional, you're always so angry, you always try to, turn this positive spin on everything, which is, what she used to say prior. And then once I became emotionally detached, it was, you are always emotionally detached, you're always so calm, you never have any emotions. And it was like, make up your mind. Like, which is it? So it kind of flipped the script. So what I learnt in that moment was it doesn't matter what I'm doing. It doesn't matter how I'm behaving. There will always be abuse. So there's no thing I can do that would ever change the abuse. If I'm super emotional, I'll get abused for being super emotional. If I'm super calm, I'll get abused for being super calm. So my behavior is not directly correlated to her abuse. So that was a wonderful lesson to learn at the time, because I'd be going, oh, that's great, because now I know that I can be true to myself and she'll still abuse me for it. So that was a really important distinction to start to realize. So then I'm going to kind of talk a little bit in thematics now, as opposed to storyline timeline, just to kind of get the key points through. But what you should be aware of here, I'm talking about, the escalations and what's happening internally. What you should be aware of is when all of this happens, um, threats will increase. So throughout all of the planning stage, enacting stage, so planning the exit, enacting the exit, post separation, divorce process, all of that, the threats from the abuser to you um, escalated. Like they were consistent and escalated. Everything from um, uh, I'm gonna jump the gun just to kind of tell something that's funny, but everything from you will never ever fall in love again. Nobody could ever love you. I was the only person who ever loved you. If you ever do date again, you have to. The only way you would ever be able to date again is if I interviewed them first before you were allowed to go on your first date. I have to meet them first before you go on your first date. So I've jumped the gun. I've gone, in post separation mode. But it was this kind of stuff that would just make me laugh. But again, I was super detached. It's like, yeah, okay, sure thing. But anyway, so these threats would increase, and it was all very, very valid threats. Like, I'm laughing now, but in the time, I don't think, um, not until I got to the court system was I ever that scared. You know, I was more in reality, I was more scared and more destroyed in the court system than I was in the relationship. And again, I don't mean to say that to dissuade you, but at this point, you know, the threats are increasing. You cannot leave, or I will destroy you. You cannot leave, or you'll never see your kids again, like that kind of stuff. I will destroy your reputation. I'll ruin you financially. You know, I'll tell everybody the truth about you. To be like, what the fuck are you on about, love? So that's what would occur. So, um, I at this point in the relationship, so I'm now going to just put a kind of, I did say thematics, but I'm now going to put a time in here. We have I have not at any point in this point said the word divorce. She's threatened divorce many, many times before, even though later on, when divorce became inevitable, she denied ever saying it. But at this point, I had never said the word divorce. I had never said I was done and I was leaving. I instead mentally, so if you remember my stories from awakening moments before, and I told that story about the screaming with the kids in the living room, and she was in the kitchen, and I was in the way there was a wall split on the left hand side. There's a living room. Anyway, that story where the kids were just playing and oblivious. I had made a decision then. Exit was required, but I never vocalized it. I kept it to myself, and because anybody who's been in an abusive situation knows you don't vocalize that stuff. So I hadn't said anything to her as yet about my intent to depart. All I wanted to do now was plan quietly by myself. So again, whether you take that as a lesson for yourselves, um, but you don't raise this with your abuser. It's an interesting thing, by the way, because in that moment, I also still felt like I needed to ask her permission if I could plan an exit. So that's called lack of agency. So if your every single decision is controlled by, like even to a $2.50 or a $1.50 dim sim, is controlled by your abuser. When it comes to planning and exiting the relationship, you feel like you need to ask their permission to plan this stuff. So I had to fight against that desire. I had to fight against it and go, how do I do this? So I had to really think it through and go, hey, I have to fight against the desire to tell her this is what I want to do. And if it's okay, if I can go ahead and plan for leaving you. And is it okay if I go talk to lawyers and plan this stuff out? Like I had to work that through. So I had to fight really hard against that conditioning. So lawyers is a good segue. So I in Australia, I don't know what it's like in other countries, but in Australia, typically the first session is free. Goes for an hour. The first session is free, and you kind of get to sound them out. You know whether or not they're the right person or the right fit for you. So I started reaching out to family lawyers very quietly. You know, I created a new email address on the cloud because I knew that she already had. She was going through my mobile phone. She was going through my computer. She was all that kind of stuff. I found out later she actually planted stuff on my computer. That was really scary. But anyway, she was going through my PC. She was going through all my emails. She was going through the whole lot. And I at the I had created a cloud account with, you know, kind of odd little deviations and new passwords and all that kind of stuff, things I've never ever used before in my life. Created all that so she couldn't get anywhere near it, and then use that to reach out to um, lawyers. So I started. I reached out to the first lawyer and organized a meeting while I was uh, out at the office. So this is before I was made redundant. So if you recall in the story last episode, I was also made redundant. So these are kind of roughly in that kind of time period. And I went and met with the first lawyer, and I laid out my story to this bloke. He was a man, did family law. I thought, oh, if anyone's going to recognise the issue, it would probably be another bloke. And I told him my story, what had been happening, what was in the relationship, what the dynamic was like, how everything was going. And I told him what my priorities were. And I guarantee every single person who's listened to this will understand this. I said, my priorities are my children. That's it. Like priority number one, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. Yep. And he's like, "Oh, what about the assets? What about the money?" I'm like, "That literally is like priority number 15. Like the priorities 1 to 14, my kids. That's it." And sat down with that lawyer, worked it all through, um, and at the end of it, he said, "Look, hey, the best I think I can do for you maybe is you get every second weekend." And I was like, "What do you mean?" He's like, no hesitation, no exploration beyond that. It's just like, nah, I'm sorry, but in today's day and age, this is from the lawyer, we'll have to go in with an assumption that you might be able to get every second weekend." And I was like, nah, I'm not going to go in like that. So then I went into the second lawyer, so completely new lawyer. And for those of you who are interested, again, I'll put a card up on the screen in a second. For those of you who are interested, I do have an exit planning guide on my website. Have a look because there's some tips on talking to lawyers as well. But I went to the second one, and the second one was very similar to the first. The guy, it was a video call. Like the guy, again, another male lawyer, had pretty much lost the case before we'd even spoken. Like, and I remember talking to him, going, "Hey, look, I am a victim of family violence." And I'll never remember his words back at me because they kind of were seared into my brain. He just said, "It is what it is, mate." I was just like, "The fuck?" Like, what do you mean it is what it is? It was just like this resigned shrug with, "It is what it is." Even being the victim of family violence, it is what it is. And he'd lost before we had even taken on the case. So then I went to another lawyer after that. So now I'm on lawyer number 3 that I had interviewed, and another bloke. This guy was tired, tired, and said the same thing. In essence, it was just like, "Sorry, mate, I might be able to get you every second weekend." So I was losing hope, and I was talking to a work colleague, former work colleague. Sorry, we weren't working together at the time. Former work colleague, and I was talking to him about everything that happened and where I was at and all this kind of stuff because he could sense something was off. And he said, "Well, he can probably point me to a good lawyer." He's like, "Female, really understands this type of stuff. Highly recommend." I was like, "Yeah, fair enough." And again, if you look at my website, there's a if you go, there's where do you go to find lawyers? Her law firm is at the top of this list, and you'll understand why in a sec. So I organised a free 1 hour meeting as we do in Australia, and I met this lady, and it was like a fucking breath of. She's like a bulldog. She was insanely awesome. Like she just understood it. She understood the patterns of control. She understood the impacts of the false allegations. She understood the system and how the system would work. She understood my priorities and respected them. She understood the challenge that we were going to be undertaking, and then she committed to supporting and helping through that particular journey. And I was blown away. Like this is like aside from her just generally being a bloody impressive human being, she was someone who really understood these types of dynamics and these types of people that I was dealing with, which is my ex-wife, the types of things that were likely to occur, and then how to kind of work it through in a really logical way. And the main thing I think was she didn't assume that we'd lost. Instead, she focused on priorities and said, "This is what we will focus on." And she asked me near the end of the end of the meeting, "Oh, what do you think? Uh, you know, this is going to be a hard battle. And again, this is not easy for anybody to do this. Sorry, I should have put those on mute. It's not easy for anybody to do this, but I actually said to her, look, my only priority is my children. This is not wise words to say to a lawyer, by the way. A reasonable, rational, ethical lawyer, yes, which is 100% what my lawyer was. But a non-ethical lawyer, I don't think you should ever say this. I said, my priorities are my children. Every single money dollar I have, every single asset I have, you can fucking burn it to the ground. I don't give a shit. There's not a single cent in the world that measures up to my children. I want equal parenting rights because I thought that was what was equitable, and because this is the hard truth, and because in today's climate towards men, I didn't feel like I could ever win primary custody. I felt like the best I could do as a man in an abused situation was to maybe get 50-50. So I went, that's what I'm going to aim for. And every else I've gotten to the ground, I'll burn it. Like I've been bankrupt, or I haven't been bankrupt, but I've been destitute before, and I've managed to claw my way back up. I can do it again if I need to. Sadly, that is what happened. But that's what I said. And she went, "Okay, cool. I just want to know what your priority was." I was like, "Fantastic." So at that point, when I had been through 4 other lawyers, I had reached out to family who weren't believing me, and I had, by this kind of juncture, was made redundant now, but now is on to Scott, which is the psychologist I mentioned in the last episode. Finally felt like I had 2 very thin ropes in the dark that I could just get my fingers around and latch onto, and that's the reality of it. And that's also why Standing Again exists, which is, I put this in a comment in a YouTube comment yesterday, which was, um, it only takes one light bulb in a lighthouse to be invaluable to somebody in the fog. And that's essentially what Stand Again is meant to be. And that's what Scott was, and that's what this lawyer was to me, which is finally someone who could see what I had been talking about by this point for over a year and a half, and could finally start to find at least some sort of pathway towards something that was a little bit safer. So then it came to planning. So, with my psychologist's help, my lawyer's help, the very first piece of advice, again, everybody's situation is unique. This is the advice I received for my particular situation. They both recognized how dangerous my ex could be. And if ever you want us to know why I'm anonymous, that's why. I have kids to protect. That is why I'm anonymous, and that's why I will forever be anonymous. Is it is not safe, but I will refuse to not be supporting other men who are in these types of challenges. So they both recognise it's dangerous for me to say the words, "I want a divorce." So we had to plan instead. So first things first, safety. So, what was it that I could set up? Did I have enough money put aside? No, didn't have a single friggin' cent. Did I have safe locations I could identify? Who are my emergency contact? All that kind of stuff I had to get prepped up and ready. And again, this is before any conversation with my ex-wife around divorce and separation. And I was trying very hard to continue to play her game so that she didn't pick up on the fact that I had gone, okay, now I need to figure out how to exit out of this safely. Scott, my psychologist, focused on the emotional preparation. So Guilt tripping was insane from my ex-wife. She even did love bombing as well. It's like she went straight back to trying to flatter me and all this kind of crap, and then trying to profess love, and then would flip and demand to know who I had slept with, and be like, I haven't slept with anyone. Like, it's honest truth, I hadn't stayed loyal in that relationship um, for the entire time. Like, I've never once done anything even remotely that would betray her or the relationship. Yeah, the relationship is a relationship. You hold that sanctity. But it was all part of the pattern. So with Scott's help, I was doing a whole lot of journaling and a whole lot of kind of writing stuff down and getting the tools ready to fortify myself. And again, a lot of that is now in the Stand Again website and the stuff that I talk about. And I spent a lot of time kind of preparing for the emotional fortitude you needed to go through this process, knowing that it's likely to uh, be very, 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 very challenging. And in my instance, it was near fatal, and I had to kind of work through that process. And then I went through the setting up the checklists, like, have I got all the essential? Do I know where my passport is? Do I know where birth certificates are? Do I have bank card, medication, account pass? Like all that stuff. Again, most of this is captured on the exit planning website as well. But I had to um, be very careful as well. So I couldn't just blindly go in and change all the passwords on my phone and all that kind of stuff, because that would have elicited a reaction. So I had to keep that facade running while working to run, lawyer searches and legal searches on browsers in incognito mode, and then trying to kind of work all the way through it, and then making sure the cloud account never showed up on my phone. It only ever showed up on my work computer. All that kind of stuff, I had to be really careful of. Then I had to get tracking devices to just check. Like at that point, we had tiles, so I couldn't do anything about that. She had a tile in my wallet and a tile in um, my phone was linked to the tile. Like, it actually tracks your phone as well. All that kind of stuff. I had to work through all that as carefully as I could without it becoming obvious. But I was keeping as many records as I could as well. So if you know how much I prattle, you've seen my website, you know how much I like to write. Then you can imagine what my diary was like. My diary was insane, where I broke down everything that was occurring and what had occurred. And and again, I recommend you do this, which is every time abusive behaviors occur, I was writing down the date, the time, what happened, how I responded. It's like an incident tracker. Which again, if you need the website, look at the website. There's an incident tracker template there, and I was notarizing all of this along the way, and I started to build up my evidence. I started to take photos and take in Australia. Each state has different recording laws, and more broadly in Australia, it is a two-party law, so you can't record someone without their consent unless unless the recording is in defense of a criminal accusation, which is a really interesting little side point. I needed to know that because if you've heard my previous episodes, um, one of the false allegations towards me was of a criminal nature. Well, when we get to post separation and divorce, new allegations came out which are absolutely friggin' bonkers. And we'll get to that when we get to those episodes. But you know, what I've faced so far at this point was pretty minor in comparison. So I was keeping these records, and I was trying to build up a safe support network. So I was connecting to my good friend who was now becoming more and more aware of what was occurring, and he was a new friend at work. So I was trying not to put it too much onto him, but he essentially just went, "No, let loose," and I was like, "Yeah, cool, thank you." And I was reaching out to my mother as well and having conversations with her, but also it was I didn't find out until like a year after this. She didn't believe me. Didn't she just kind of went, "Yeah, okay, cool, cool. Okay, she's abusive. Happy wife, happy life. Like if you've done something to have deserved this," like she actually asked me, like, "I don't know what it is you've done to deserve all of this, but maybe you need to have a think about it." I'm like, "Okay, cool." So then, and she's good once she's realised she's good now, but at the time it was not the support you need. And then I had to get the legal components ready. So my lawyer, now that she was engaged, was kind of waiting for me to pull the trigger with her, and she was also getting ready for the false allegations. I told my lawyer everything. Again, if you read the website, I'll tell this to the um, with your lawyer, you tell your lawyer everything. Like everything, every little dirty secret you think you have. I just told my lawyer the whole lot. I went, "This is everything you need to know," and they need to know it so they can get prepped up and ready. But all the false allegations that I had, I needed to be aware of. And then she started raising, "Hey, just be aware. You just need to note this, note that, note this." Like should go, "Hey, you need to be aware of any threats, and I need to be made aware of them. Um, you need to be aware of any actions that are deemed as parental alienation or withholding of the kids, and I need to know about them." So we had that kind of conversation. And any time that it might be that um, she's recording. So what I had just said, I had this. Uh, had this. It was this weird incident where I was getting the kids organised for childcare, and um, the wife at this point um, just decided to change the whole morning routine completely. Like she just flipped the whole morning routine, and the kids got really distressed because they're like, "No, no, no! Like we do this and then we do that to get to childcare," and they were really confused and distressed. And then the ex-wife got really angry about this, and then I was trying to calm them down, and then the ex-wife started yelling to the air, like she wasn't even looking towards us or the kids. She was looking towards. Oh, now that I think about it, she was looking towards the bookshelf, and started yelling to the bookshelf, um, saying that the kids were scared of me, and and it was like this weird performance, like, "Oh no, be careful! Like they're scared of you. They're scared of the kids are scared of you. The kids are scared of you." And she was just doing this whole performance to this bookcase. And again, by this point, I was past my awakening moments, and I was starting to recognize what was going on. So I loudly vocalized, "That's not what's happening right now. The kids are actually in my arms getting comforted." Like I actually, just played it out calmly because I was in this calm mode. Um, so she must have been recording, but my lawyer kind of warned me, "Hey, just be aware that she's probably going to try to set you up now as well because she can probably see that something's off." So a lot of that stuff was happening. And again, stay calm, stay factual, and anticipate. Far out. I think my brain burnt on anticipation. Dear God, I was planning every single scenario you could possibly think of. And then prepare for false allegations. Prepare for the issues that are likely to come from all that kind of stuff. And what became important through this was I had to um, I had to let go of. some self blame, like not all self blame. I had to let go of some self blame because I was carrying with me so much doubt around planning the exit and how to get it done that I was just um, confused. So I had to let go of a lot of that. I had to recognize I was damaged and I was broken, and that the damage and the breaking was not my doing, but that I was not well. Like I was a shell of a human being that I used to be. So I had to kind of lean a little bit on the support around me, like my lawyer, like my psychologist, like my mother, like my sister-in-law. I had to lean on and like that friend of mine. I had to lean on them a little bit just to kind of prop me up mentally because I was a shell. But also I had to recognize I was in survival mode. So not to beat myself up for being in that state. Like I had to recognize that it was okay to be in that state, as in um, not to chastise myself for being in survival mode. I was in survival mode, so I had to go. Okay, it's okay to be in survival mode. I'm not in recovery yet. I just have to get through planning and then enacting this divorce. So then, how do I plan? So the actual plan was I had to get the conversation, and again, this is my situation. This is in conversation with my lawyer and in conversation with my psychologist. I had to figure out how to get a conversation happening with my ex wife where she was the one who called divorce. And the reason for that, again, every situation is unique. The reason for that is both my psychologist and my lawyer were fearful over the reaction of my ex-wife if I called for the divorce. Um, so we would have these conversations where she would go ballistic, and she threatened divorce, and I would go, okay, I think that's probably a wise thing for us to do. And then she'd deny that she ever said it, and then would have another conversation around it, and she would say, "I'm divorcing you," and I'm like, That's probably a wise thing for us to do." And then she'd deny it, and then that kind of cycle happened a few times. Like she would deny she ever said the word divorce, and then that cycle happened a few times until she was like, "No, we're getting a divorce. I've decided." And I go, "Okay, that's what we're going to have to. I think that's probably the best thing for you, and for the kids and all that kind of stuff." So for me, the plan was to kind of get to that mode. And if you think about the plan more broadly, it was how do we get to a mode of separation now is required, but also how do I make sure everything in the background is set up and ready to go? Like, do I have a lawyer ready? What about the finances? All that kind of stuff. Like a lot of that, had no visibility over, so I had to do the best that I could. And then when we get to the next episode, I'm gonna pause here. When we get to the next episode of my story, I'm gonna talk about the period between um, this moment of divorce now is in the air to actual separation. And in my particular instance, I did not leave the property. So divorce was called through to actual separation, like proper separation, was quite a while actually, and we lived together the entire time. And I'm going to talk to you about that particular period because it was um, very, very scary, but also there were things that occurred during that moment, during that period of time, which are in legal in nature that I think would be interesting to people as kind of red flags to look out for, which I'll kind of work through in the next episode. I'm going to leave it there for this episode. This was predominantly around getting up to that moment. So, kind of working with people to get up to that moment to have the word divorce kind of come out, and some of the stuff that happens between. I feel like I've glossed over a lot of stuff and skipped over a lot of stuff. That's the nature of being loosely scripted. But until then, appreciate you all and all the best. Bye. This is Stand Again, lived experience platform for male survivors of family violence. Please like, comment, and subscribe. Your voice might just help another man find his. If you're looking for one on one support, you can book coaching with a member of the Stand Again team. Simply visit standagain.com.au, where you will also find grounded information on surviving and recovering from family violence as a man. As always, remember that no matter how many times you've been knocked down, you can stand again.